nice to see you. Thanks so much for being on the podcast.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, well, I was going to say pleasure to be here, but we're in your setting. So thank you for having us. It's such a lovely, lovely podcast setting.
You're very welcome. It's always nice to have people in the space.
Yeah, and a bit different for you because you're normally the host. So
it's my first time on this side of the podcast. So a whole new experience for me. So it's really good.
Well, hopefully I do a good job for you. But I think I love the topic that you picked. So we'll get onto that in a minute. But if we start by maybe you introducing yourself, the role you do here at Ghyston.
Sure. Yeah. So, well, I'm Ric. I'm Ric Hill. I'm one of the founders of Ghyston. Ghyston's a software development company based in central Bristol. I run the company with my wife, Emily. We founded it together just over 12 years ago. So it's quite a long time. There were 5 of us when we started back in 2012. We're about 60 odd people now.
Brilliant.
So it's been sort of a gradual journey of growth and expansion. We really love being right in the heart of Bristol and part of the Bristol tech scene. So yeah, we're always really happy to get involved with things. My role, well, when we started, so my background is technical.
Yeah.
And not always technical. I actually did a philosophy degree, which makes for good pub conversation, but not a lot for career progression.
Okay.
So yeah, and then I did a second degree in computer science and sort of moved into that field. So I've sort of been a techie from the beginning, but then I've moved into a lot of project management roles, a lot of product ownership, sort of product definition roles, quite a lot of client-facing stuff, consultancy. And then when we started out here 12 years ago, I basically did everything. There's only 5 of us. I was the finance director. I was the HR director. I was like all the different roles put in together. And then gradually, as we've grown, I've been able to kind of hand bits of that off. And then about 6 years or so ago, I actually took a step back from the business for a little while, and I went and CTO'd for, initially for a client of ours. And then I saw them through a private equity deal that they were going through. So sort of took them on that journey, and then I moved into fractional roles. So we're going to talk a bit more about that later.
Yeah.
But since then, I've come back to Ghyston. So I spent a few years doing that. I've been a few years back in the business now, and so I kind of take on the job title of CTO. But really, I'm just sort of one of the leadership team, and one of the things I love doing with clients is talk about their technical strategy and that sort of stuff. And I do a lot of the kind of leadership stuff internally. So mixed bag still.
You do everything.
I don't do everything anymore, which is a bit of a relief. So I now, that's one of the joys of growing a company is you kind of actually get to pick and choose what you do a little bit. So it's a real privilege to be able to do that and just do the stuff I love.
What a dream. And you love it. You don't seem weathered. You're still full of energy. You love it. So you mentioned there that you took some time away from Ghyston, then you came back. So that is basically the topic today, isn't it? Is exploring how that was for you going into fractional work, what the benefit was for your career, what you brought back to Ghyston. And then on top of that, you guys actually run a model where you encourage part-time work at Ghyston, or you employ people on a part-time basis, like kind of in volume really, and it works for you guys. So I really wanted to explore that because I don't think a lot of businesses necessarily do it. They might have an idea of the 4-day working week or whatever, and it's setbacks. So I think your journey's been so inspirational, and what you guys do here with employment at Ghyston. So keen to delve into it.
Sure. Yeah.
So let's talk a bit about you with your fractional work then. So you mentioned that you took time away from Ghyston. What you started to work for a client. So what prompted that change? Because surely you're an agency, you just keep working for that client under Ghyston. Yeah,
well, they kept asking. Was right. That's a real trick behind it. So they sort of realised they needed sort of some heavier weight tech leadership within the organisation to carry them through this exit. So they asked me, and I said, no, I'm very, very happy at Ghyston, thank you.
Yeah.
And then they asked again, and then they asked again, and I was like, well, actually, like I've been doing this for a while. Change of scene. I've probably got quite a lot to learn. This is probably going to be quite an interesting experience. So eventually, I sort of caved and said yes.
Yeah.
And I don't regret it at all, because it's really as someone who runs an agency, it's really interesting to sit on the other side of the table for a while. It's the only real way you can gain proper insight into what it's like to be there. You can exercise all the empathy you want to and so on, but there's no substitute for actually sitting in that seat. And that's something that I really came to get so much from. Things that you don't necessarily expect. It's around the interfaces with the other departments in the business. It's around how the team management responsibilities are different. The politics is different. The general kind of culture is quite different because it's not one thing to the next. People are kind of committed and on it's almost like a slower moving train sometimes because it's on fixed tracks and on a destination. You kind of know where you are a bit more. Whereas in the agency world, every month is a different project. There's loads of different stuff going on, and you're ducking and diving around all over the place. So it's a much more stable environment, but has a lot of different challenges of its own. Yeah,
absolutely. So you worked for them. So was that full time for them, or were you doing part time? How did that work?
Yeah, so that was full time. Yeah, pretty much full time. I was I tried to take a day a week off for a while, but it didn't really work out. It was too big a job. So it was full time. But then when I moved on from there, that's when I thought actually I'd like to try something a little bit different. And I'd heard about the fractional model.
Yeah.
And so that sounded like it might be quite interesting.
Okay.
So I set myself up for that. Went down a few different routes of sort of getting clients on board. I was going to go down a partnership route, but I actually found clients on my own. So sort of I ended up with quite a full load of work, or as full as I wanted to be. Because that's the real thing about fractional work, is you actually have quite a lot of choice.
Yeah.
If you're willing to say no, which can be hard when it's an interesting opportunity and you want to do it. If you're willing to say no, you can actually control your work-life balance in a really nice way. And so I was aiming to work sort of 3 to 4 days a week.
Okay.
And then, because obviously you've got a little bit of admin work, you've got to be kind of running your own business, so you've got all your admin and finances and all that sort of stuff to deal with. But mostly I wanted time for hobbies and family and that sort of thing. I have time-consuming hobbies, which kind of keeps me.
We know. Busy. So, for the sake of the viewers, what are these hobbies?
My two main hobbies at the moment are triathlon, which I've been doing for ages, and you've actually caught me just back from a trip abroad to be racing triathlon. I came back yesterday from the World Championships in Torremolinos.
Wow!
So yeah, that was quite a cool weekend.
How did it go?
Not too bad, thank you. Yeah, I was quite pleased with the result. I came 21st in my age group in the world and 4th Britain. So
that's wild.
Quite happy with that.
That's amazing.
So it was a good race, and then I did the very next day I did the team relay race. Which, if you ever watched the Olympics team relay, it's exactly the same format. It's so fun, really fast paced.
Yeah.
So I did that for the first time as well, which was a great experience.
Amazing.
So
so you're going to be on the Olympics soon?
No, definitely not.
No, not a thing.
No, I mean those guys were all there, right? And I was watching the elites race while I was there, and it's a totally different league.
Right,
they are really amazing.
So you're number 4 in the UK, but not on the Olympic level.
Only in my age group, man. Only
right,
in my age
got
group. Yeah, I'm old, so yeah, it makes it easier.
You're allowed to be that fast.
So anyway, time-consuming hobbies. Yeah. I do triathlon, takes quite a lot of training time, and I'm learning to fly as well. So I love student pilots.
So you've got to get your hours in for that.
So yeah, it takes up a bit of time. And I've got 3 young kids, and so they take up quite a lot of time and life. It's nice to have a bit of capacity.
Yeah, it gets really taxing. Yeah. So you aimed to do 3 to 4 days working with your clients. So how does that work? How much time do you give each client? Does it vary?
Yeah, so I had some clients that were very much on an advisory basis, and I actually loved doing this work. So I'd be on a retainer for sort of a day a month or something like that. I'd be giving board level strategic advice on how they should be approaching their tech stuff, and I love that stuff. It's all the work that I enjoy the most, and it's quite clear cut because you're saying, I'm just giving you this advice, and then you can take that to go and do whatever you want. I'm not actually involved in the execution.
Yeah, that's good.
Which makes it quite different from the more typical fractional gigs, which are more like 1 to 2 days a week.
Yeah.
And with that, you are sitting in that boundary zone between, doing the strategic stuff, but also actually dipping down into the tactical and actually having to execute some work as well. And you're much more hands-on managing other people in the business sometimes, and you're just in the business a lot more. But also really good fun. And I learned a lot about different companies and how they work. Saw all the different variety. I learned a lot about different PE groups and how that sort of funding strategy impacts the day-to-day running the business. And I learned a lot about like CEOs that I like and don't like, and that I get on with, and what makes a good culture. Seeing them all side by side all the time. So you get really good insight, much more than you do working as an agency. I mean, you see into business quite a bit as an agency, but you're not actually in them. So it is a slightly different level where you just get a little bit more insight into how it's all working and what it's doing.
Yeah, that's amazing. So then when you came back to Ghyston, I imagine that benefited you. I mean, firstly, how did you come back to Ghyston? Because that sounds great. Like you say, the kids, your hobbies, work, surely it's all ticking and you think this is for me now.
Yeah, no. It was great, and I like the variety. But the variety is a double-edged sword, because on the one hand it keeps everything interesting, but on the other hand you're doing a lot of context switching. Within, I might say I'm working 1 day a week for this company, 2 days a week for this company, but the reality is they're not in whole day units, right? So the majority of the work might be in a whole day unit, but I'm going to be on the email and on the phone. And people are going to be in touch with me. I'm getting Teams messages and that sort of thing. And you want to be helpful and respond to things, but it means you're constantly switching. And so I'm getting a question in on a Teams message, say, and I'm like, okay, hang on, which company is this? Okay, these are the people, and you just have to take that moment to reset. And it is quite tiring doing all that context switching. And what you tend to end up doing, just because you want to be helpful and you're trying to have a good impact, is you end up actually working more than you're being paid for. And it's very, very easy to do. So I found myself in that sort of situation. A couple of clients sort of naturally moved on to other solutions, and one of my clients wanted more and more of me, and they were actually my favorite client. So I kept saying yes to the more and more, and I actually consolidated quite a bit into them. And by the end of my engagement with them, I was doing 3 days a week with them, and I had a couple of 1 day a month type things going on around the edges. So it was the right level of business for me. But then that company wanted to go to the next level, and they were like, we really need someone full time. Come on, Rick, come and do it. And I'm like, well, no, I'm sorry. It's just not going to be me.
Companies like to entice you to work with them.
So I was like, no, that's full time is just not for me. And as it happened at the same time, where Ghyston was and things that were moving around, a key person at Ghyston got poached. It happens.
Still a sore subject.
And anyway, the gap that she left, I was obviously in quite a good position to fill. So that sort of happened at the same time that this other company was saying, well, we really need someone full time. So I basically helped them hire a full time replacement for myself, which is a great experience to do, because you kind of, it's really nice leaving somewhere to feel like you're actually you're carrying it on a bit with the next person. You have a say in who that person is. You feel that they're going to take responsibility for it. You have confidence that you're leaving it in good hands. So that was a really good experience to go with them, and it was great for them. They got someone who's great, and they're still with them.
I was going to say, do you know much about them now?
Yeah, we keep in touch. Yeah. So I think it's all going well. They've been through an exit. They were PE backed, and they've been through an acquisition actually. So they've kind of been through that process. And it's all still going well, I think. So, and meanwhile, I came back to Ghyston, and kind of like the rest is history. But obviously, I didn't come back to Ghyston full time, 4 days a week.
Yeah. So this brings us on to the kind of second part of the podcast, part time.
Yeah.
So it's not just you. It's not just, I'm the founder, I want to work 4 days a week. That would be nice. And everyone's normal 5 days. You roll that out across business, don't you?
Yeah.
Like everyone's got the option of going part time.
Yeah, and I think the world's changing, right? And we made this step change as a society from being typically men would work and women would stay at home and look after the kids and the family.
I love hearing the change, because I'm pro women, getting all the rights.
and it's great. We liberated half the potential workforce, got them into work. But one of the things that didn't shift in a compatible way, it's like you've gone from having one parent looking after the household to having no parents at all looking after the household. So true. And actually that's a really big, difficult gap. And Emily and I both work at Ghyston. Yeah. For us to both be full time in the company it's almost child neglect. Yeah. It's really hard. And I think a much more natural capacity is if you've got two working parents, for them each to be 3 or 4 days. Yeah. That to me actually feels like life balance. Yeah. We talk about work-life balance in a certain way, but when you've got a family to look after and to care for and all the stuff going on at home, actually, there's a reason why the sort of male-dominated system worked in the past, because it had a capacity balance. And since female liberation, which is obviously absolutely amazing, and I don't ever for a moment,
gap, doesn't it?
It just, I think it puts family life under a lot of pressure. And if you've got 2 full-time working parents, that's a really hard job to have young kids, and school pickups are not designed for that. The school system's not moved on. And holidays, let's not even go there. I mean, there's loads.
We are literally in the half term now, aren't we? Yeah. 2 weeks.
And kids are in the office. You've seen 2 of my kids in the office. Yeah. So it's a really difficult thing to manage. Yeah. So I think it's much more natural actually to be like that slightly under capacity operation. So it just makes sense from a life perspective. But then from a business perspective, it makes loads of sense too. And it's sort of, if you take it to the extreme end of the fractional side, so we have a fractional CFO. I've been a fractional CTO. The benefits of that is that you get the expertise of someone really awesome for much less money than you would have to pay for them full time. Yeah. And actually, what you care about most is their expertise. It's the gravitas and experience that they're bringing to their job. Yeah. Not them being a bum on a seat for 5 days a week. Yeah. The value drop off is huge, especially when you're a smaller organisation. The value drop off from that level of experience, you get huge value out of 1 day. You get a decent value out of 2 days. You get less value out of 3, and it just drops down.
Right. Because I was going to say, can you quantify that in terms of job role? Like, you'd think CFO, wow, a massive job. You need them to be in all the time, but you've worked out actually no, day 3 and 4 are.
Yeah, exactly. Because we've got a really good financial controller who's fantastic, and she takes the brunt of all that work. Yeah. So there's not actually a volume of work to be done. It's the expertise that we need in the room. And that's what we're paying for. And it does tend to be in my mind that you get better value out of less full time the more senior the job is, if that makes sense. So if for juniors in the company, we're very flexible. It's fine for people to be part time, but you generally, as long as you've got enough work for them to do the whole time, you get the same value out of them, whether it's 5 days or 4 or 3. Yeah. But when someone's much more senior, you actually tend to get much more value out of them at 3 or 4 days than you do out of 5. Yeah. Because it's the expertise you want, and you delegate the stuff to someone else that would fill up the rest of the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what would be the obvious drawbacks, if there are for you? I mean, obviously it works, so you might think, well, those kind of myths aren't really an issue for us. But what do you see maybe companies watching thinking, it wouldn't work because, and how have you mitigated that?
So the biggest challenge, I think, is probably calendar management and calendar gaps. So if you need 5 people in a room to make a decision, and the trend these days is taking more and more people to make decisions. Like, people want more input from different people.
What's that about?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it comes with its pros and its cons, right? And it's great to get diversity of thought and experience into a decision. I think does improve the quality of the decisions, but it can slow things down. Yeah. So it's that sort of trade-off. But yeah, if you've got 5 part-time people and they all have a different day off in the week, you literally can't get them all in the room at the same time. So, but I mean, we make it so that teams always have a team day So, and that's the day when everyone's expected to be in. And for the senior leadership team, it's Tuesday, and that's actually cascaded down to most of the organisation because, so Tuesdays are generally team days. You're in there on a Tuesday. The office is pretty busy. We have our all hands meeting. They're usually pretty well attended. There's lots happens on Tuesday, but different teams will have different days. So we do have to manage to make sure that there are days when we get a lot of overlap, and also Tuesdays is often impossible to get a meeting in the diary because there's already so many regular meetings in the diary. So we do have challenges over that sometimes. And then having days when there's no relevant decision maker around can hold things up. So we try not to have just one decision maker for anything, so people can actually decide on other people's behalves. So we get a good level of cover because that's good for holidays and illness and all that sort of stuff as well. But you do get times when there's no relevant person available. You get that with holidays too, especially school holiday time, that sort of thing. But it gets exacerbated a little bit when you've got people part-time. Those gaps in the diary can get bigger.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you see there being are there rules, like you mentioned that from the juniors you'll get value across 3 days or 5 days, but at Ghyston, are there different rules for a senior versus a junior or not?
No, we don't have different rules to different people. Across the board, we don't have different rules to different people. The car parking spaces in the building can be booked by anyone. We don't do that kind of hierarchy stuff. So no, there's no special treatment for people. It's all on a per request basis, but the sort of working assumption is if it works for the business, it works. You know, and we'll try and make it work for the business.
That's really good. And you mentioned obviously a lot of the benefits being you're getting the expertise, you're getting a concentrated kind of skill set for less money. Is there anything else that you've seen?
It's also you don't need to hire in whole numbers. So right now we're hiring for an IT role that we need to fill, but we don't need someone full time. We can do some outsource model or that thing, but at the end of the day we think we'll advertise that as a part-time role because it's just not the right amount of work to go full time. And we don't want to have to pay for a full-time role, frankly. So we size the roles according to actually the need of the business, and the needs of the business don't move in whole numbers in every direction. For the bulk of what we do, for development roles and those sorts of things, then it is we just, if we need more, we need more. It's not like we just need half a person more. But when it's the more niche roles, like maybe it's a marketing role or then actually you just need a bit of extra here and there. It doesn't come in whole people, does it? That's just not how businesses grow.
No. So you mentioned there recruiting. So do you notice an impact on the talent pool you've got access to because the roles are part-time, or is it more positive reaction?
Yeah, it's interesting. So for the most part, it's a really good thing. And we get a lot of people for part-time roles that are just so grateful to have them because they find it difficult to get a role that meets their family needs alongside and matches that with their skills and expertise. And a lot of roles that are part-time out there just aren't a good fit for people. They don't really leverage their skill set properly. So all of our roles kind of get advertised with some sort of option in the small print. It's because if we get an applicant from someone, even if it's advertised as a full-time role, and we get an applicant from someone who says who's amazing, but they want to do 30 hours a week, it's like, well, great, let's see if we can make that work. Yeah,
that's so refreshing because as a recruiter, all too often I'll get candidates like that in a process where the role's full-time and the clients won't budge. And the candidate would be perfect for the role and they say, I've got a requirement to have 1 day a week off. They say no. Or I've even had it where they say they've condensed their hours, do the same hours across 4 days, and the client say no, we need a bum on seat for the 5th day.
That's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah.
Sorry, we're at 24 minutes.
Cool.
Okay.
What have you done?
No, nothing really. I'm just trying to be fixed. I didn't know what time we were on.
I thought it'd be really good to hear about the impact that it's had, i.e. staff retention.
That's what I was going to go on to next, was retention,
And then I think as an audience member listening to you both, I would find it really interesting to know what was the sort of tipping point to move on to this new structure of the company, if there was one. So was there something definite that happened that was like, actually, we're at a point now where we need to just look at the structure of the business and go, was it not working? Is it the talent pool access? Is it, you know, stress and work-life balance? I mean, you might not be anything, but if there was something, I think that would be a really interesting question.
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah.
Was there something?
Yeah.
Was there?
Not really. So I can just give the honest answer. So it was.
Can Ant ask that?
Yeah.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Oh, what? Like in the film?
Yeah.
Just do it now.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I've forgotten what we were talking about just before.
Yeah, because we were talking about talent pooling, weren't we? And I said about my anecdote in recruitment.
Oh yeah.
Oh, how did we finish it?
I thought we finished that. That's
did it finish? Yeah. Did it finish?
Yeah. Okay.
I know your mind's probably going blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, because I thought you were going to go on to something else, but
I was going to touch on this sort of topic, but it's fine. We just run. Yeah.
Fine. I think retention makes sense next. So can we do that, and then I'll ask about
the final question.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's the impact on the talent pool. So obviously people are, like you say, quite grateful for part-time roles. And to be honest, as a recruiter, I do see that. There's just not the access to them. How has it affected the retention in the business?
So we've always been blessed with really good retention. I say blessed. We put a lot of effort into it. It is deliberate. We put a lot of effort into having a good workplace and it being a place where people want to come into work and do their best. We do have like over 90% averages year on year. That's just how we are. Last year we had 100% retention. It just people stick around.
Wow. So a whole year with no one leaving.
Yeah.
That's wild.
I know. It actually that can be a bit of a double-edged sword as well. It's great, but yeah, when you're planning because we plan our recruitment in advance and stuff, you're planning to like have a little bit of attrition. You end up with more people than you plan to have. So it happens. But it's great. It's great that people want to stay, and we really like that. In terms of the part-time thing, I mean, it's got to be a massive retention thing, because I think if people saw that opportunity elsewhere, and that's what they really wanted from their life balance, and they saw that as really important, then they'd be using their feet to vote for that.
Yeah.
It's got to happen, right? People make choices for what they need. So I think anything you can do to be flexible makes it more likely that people will stay. But you need to be careful that people aren't just staying for that, right?
True. Yeah, absolutely, and kind of stunting their own development, because there's so much else that goes into staying with a company. I mean, it kind of leads me on to, was there a tipping point for you guys as to move into this model where maybe like somebody watching might think, oh, I want to improve my retention, that's clearly how you did it, or whatever it might be? Was there a reason why you went to this model?
No, it's accidental.
No. Okay.
Yeah. So I think probably the first part-time, well, Emily's always been part-time as long as we've been around. So that's sort of been a baseline that's sort of sat in there. And I've always been jealous, so that's why I wanted to go part-time too, because I quite wanted to have a bit of that. And then we've got quite a few people who have gone through fatherhood, being at Ghyston. They join without kids, they have kids, and then they want to, or motherhood just as much so, but we do have more men than women, especially of the slightly older range. The fathers came first, I think. That's an obvious point at which people think they come back from parental leave, and that's kind of what they want to do. They want to shift to that working pattern. So people transitioning to parenthood, I think, has been one of the biggest things. And then but we have hired some roles that are part-time because that was right for the business. We just didn't need a whole person, and our minds. But when you've got part-time people, your mind's just open to that as the thing that you should do. And then bring on like a fractional CFO, that just seemed really natural, because that's we want the expertise, not the time.
Yeah, it's so refreshing. And like you said there, with the parenthood and actually swaying more to dads, just because that's what you have in the business, that's really, really important, I think, because whenever I go on about supporting women in the workplace, part of it goes back to that kind of set in stone way that we look at it, that if kids need anything, the mum makes sacrifice at work, or she goes and picks up the kids if they're sick or whatever. But then I think, okay, we don't necessarily need to give the flexibility to women. We need to give flexibility to men.
Absolutely.
So they can also support
100%.
their partner in that and
100%,
say,
yeah.
you stay at work, actually. You do the long hours at work because I can alleviate myself. But where I've been before, it never seems the case. Like, if, say, something's wrong with my child, I will get asked, oh, do you need to leave? How about my husband leaves his job?
Yeah. And you get it the other way around of like, in some places, if a father says, "Oh, I've got to go and pick your child up from school," they're just thrown up. They're like, "Well, why can't your wife do that?"
Yeah.
That sort of reaction.
You're not supported
Don't like
to
that.
also support your child because you want to be there.
Yeah. And so I think one of the most effective ways to close the gender pay gap is to give more flexibility to men.
Yeah.
Like I think that really would help address the whole situation.
Because we're not, as women, trying to chase you guys full time, chase your money, whatever. You guys are dropping down to us, kind of being more flexible and sharing the load.
If men can have more flexibility in their working lives, that means women have to make fewer sacrifices for their careers.
Absolutely.
Yeah, there's and often that's just like actually men want to be stay-at-home dads a bit more, not necessarily 100%.
My husband says it all the time.
Yeah, it's becoming more socially acceptable. If there's more people doing it, you've got more people to hang out with. That's a big part of it, right? Like parenting can be lonely, especially when you've got toddlers or little babies. I think anything that kind of feeds that gender equality, it's great. It's got to be good.
Amazing. We could do a whole nother podcast on that topic. But just wrapping up this one, what would you like viewers to take away from what we discussed today, if we were to summarise? Is there a key takeaway at all?
I would just say every job description you write, always think about what the ideal number of hours are. Nice. Just don't assume that it's 5 days a week.
Yeah. I really like that. Well, thank you so much, Ric, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
See you soon.